Genesis 1 displays a flawlessly ordered world infused with balance and productivity. Unlike all other creatures, humanity, male and female, were made in the very image of God. They are God's representatives on earth and have been appointed as His stewards of all the wealth and beauty of paradise in the Garden of Eden. Actually, Eden reflects the concept of covenant. Genesis 1 sounds like the relationship between a vassal and his suzerain, a relationship in which the vassal is given full autonomy within the confines of his overlord's authority. When Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2 are read together, the profile of covenant becomes even clearer. Here, the suzerain Yahweh offers his vassals Adam and Eve the land grant of Eden, with the stipulation that humanity care for it and protect it. As Genesis chapter 2:15 states, "Then the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to cultivate and to keep it." In this perfect place, Adam and Eve are given full access to their loving Creator. The only corner of the garden which was not theirs to use and enjoy was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. From any tree of the garden you may eat freely, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat from it, you will surely die. Adam and Eve are free to do anything except decide for themselves what is good and what is evil. Yahweh reserves the right and responsibility to name those truths Himself. This was humanity's perfect world and God's perfect plan for humanity. That is, God's people dwelling in God's place with full access to His presence. The ones made in the image of God could not be forced, but instead were called upon to choose their sovereign. But Adam rejected God's commandments. With the fall, humanity loses their place in His paradise and their access to His presence. After they were expelled from Eden, the armed cherubim stand between humanity and their Creator, guarding the tree of life. Genesis chapter 2 verse 17 makes it painfully clear what the consequences would be. In that day, you shall surely die. But mercifully, even though Yahweh had every right to wipe out our rebellious race, He chose another plan, that is redemption. God spared the lives of humanity by dealing with the fury of the curse through the sacrifice of His own Son. This is the one known as the last Adam in the New Testament. Of course, He is Jesus. The goal of redemption is not the simple salvation of the individuals. God's plan is that all creation will be saved from the effects of sin, as Romans chapter 8 verse 21 reads. The creation itself also will be set free from its slavery to corruption into freedom of the glory of the children of God. Let's take a look at the cherubim of Eden. After Eden, the first reappearance of the cherubim is the design of the tabernacle in Exodus chapter 25 to 26, chapter 36 to 37. Whereas with the fall, humanity was forbidden from God's presence. But with the Mosaic covenant, God commands a meeting place so that He may dwell with His children once more. The Ark of the Covenant, which housed the tablets of the covenant within the Holy of Holies, is adorned with cherubim. Then, What is the function of the cherubim? Exodus chapter 25 verse 22 states, "There I will meet with you, and from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim, which are upon the ark of the testimony, I will speak to you about all that I will give you in commandment for the sons of Israel." God commands Moses to position two cherubim above the ark, and that God's plan was to meet and speak with the Israelites from that spot. Yahweh repeatedly described as the one enthroned above the cherubim. The cherubim on that ark of the covenant were to serve as the actual throne of Yahweh, and the ark as his footstool. And Yahweh, like all kings, intends to utilize his throne room as a place of audience with his people. Thus, the cherubim of the ark and of Eden are best understood as Yahweh's watchers and his armed guards. But the distinction between Eden and the Holy of Holies is that whereas Adam was driven from Eden with no hope of re-entry, the Holy of Holies is designed to function as God's outpost in Adam's world. Although guarded by his cherubim and set apart by means of mediation of sacrifice and a priestly staff, God once again dwells among his people. Revelation chapter 21 verse 3 reveals that with the New Jerusalem comes the presence of God, and God himself shall be among his people. According to Revelation chapter 22 verses 22 to 27, this new city will need no temple because it will not need to house God. He will live there. Its gates will never be closed because there will be no enemies to threaten it. And who will live there? Those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. And where are the cherubim in the New Jerusalem? As there is no longer any need to defend the throne room of God from Adam, we find no cherubim here either, as Revelation chapter 22 verse 4 spells out. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. To sum up, Eden and the New Jerusalem may be understood as the bookends of redemptive history. God's original intent is his final intent for humanity. Eden was the perfect plan, and God has never had any other. His goal was that the people of God might dwell in the place of God, enjoying the presence of God.